Hi everyone! Today's hairstyle idea was inspired by General Leia from the new Last of the Jedi movie trailer. As of now, the film has not yet been released, so it was kind of hard to find clear images of the back. Because of this, I'm going to put forth a disclaimer and say that this is loosely inspired, but I do hope you guys like it nonetheless. The style sports a headband roll across the front of the head, so I decided that I would build this piece separately and show you how I did it. For this part of the project, you may need a thin headband, some ribbon, and I chose royal blue to match her ring, a glue gun and glue sticks, and then of course some false hair. This bundle is a cheap synthetic that I got in a local beauty store, and it's not an exact match in terms of color, but I felt it was close enough in terms of demonstration. The hair itself is just one long weft, and I suppose that it's sold like this so that it can be used however the buyer chooses, whether you're using it for a wig, homemade clip-in extensions, or any other creative project. I started by unraveling and detangling it to the best of my ability, and then with my glue gun I attached the seam the whole way across. If we think about putting glue in our hair, most of us would probably cringe, but here with this synthetic stuff it's going to be okay. After all, the hair is just plastic and reacts the way most plastics do when you use glue. Once the expanse of the accessory is covered, I cut the excess hair off, and this left me with a headband halo of sorts. I actually thought this looked cool and wondered what kind of styles it would yield if I left it as it was. I may have to try it out in the future, but for now I'm going to move on. Besides the glue gun, I have a clear Elmer's glue and a paintbrush, and all I'm doing is starting on one end and winding the hair around and flattening the strands with adhesive. I'd wrap a portion once or twice, add some more hair in, wrap again, and then use the Elmer's to hold it. If you were working with human hair, you might be able to get away with some sort of gel, but as it is, I felt the glue was sticky and pliable enough to hold the plastic hair. As I got to the other end of the headband, I had hair that was left over, so I used a small elastic to tie it into a ponytail. With scissors, I cut that off, and then because this is synthetic, I decided to singe those ends with a lighter. That way they'd bond together and I wouldn't have to worry about it fraying apart. I also went back and cut bits off that were sticking up, and I even dipped my fingers in the Elmer's glue and then used them to smooth down remaining strands. You don't have to follow me here, but it didn't feel finished, so I used some of that deep blue ribbon to cover the ends. Like I said, I chose the blue because it matches the ring Carrie Fisher was wearing in one of the promo shots with Billy Lord. In retrospect, it might have been smarter to use a more neutral color, so that it'll blend better when you actually style it into your hair. And speaking of styling, now onto the hair idea itself. I started on clean blown out hair, which I packed a ton of dry shampoo onto. I have super fine slippery strands, so this put in a ton of the most welcome tack and grip. I parted my hair down the middle and then used my comb to draw in two vertical lines that began at the top of my head and extended to slightly behind the ear, in other words, a headband sectioning. For the moment, I'm clipping the back up so that it won't interfere with the front as I divide that up too. If any of you are familiar with my Viking-inspired braids, you'll know that those looks often utilize a 3-panel base, and that's basically what's happening here. I used the middle of my eyebrows as a guide, and I tried to keep the lines as straight as possible before clipping it up. When I had that top piece in place, I took the clip from the back section out, releasing all my remaining loose hair, and redrew the vertical lines on the sides. I'm sort of fine-tuning here. These lines start at the top of the middle panel and extend to right where my ear meets my head. And then they're marked out with clips as well. At the moment, I'm going to take a break from the front of my head and refocus my attention to the back. Many of the Star Wars looks that we love, at least the braided ones, include various hair pieces, so even though I don't often use extensions in my videos, I figured you guys wouldn't mind so much if I wore some here. I have 3 2-clip wefts, which all things considered isn't all that much additional hair, but it was just enough to fatten up that lower half section. The extensions themselves were loaded up in the back and relatively close to the nape of my neck. Before I braid, I decided I wanted to extend that front and center middle panel a little further back. I think you can see that I'm just using my fingers to make a small horizontal divide at the top of my loose hair, and then that gets combined into the already established portion. Of the 3 sections I made along my face, I needed this one to extend slightly beyond the crown of my head. But returning to that loose hair down my back, I split it into 2 and pushed a section over each shoulder. Both halves are then divided into 2 again and braided. At the end of this, you should have 4 free-hanging 3-strand braids. If you're not a fan of backcombing, this may not be a great one for you to try because that's basically what's next. Remember the hair I just sectioned out around my crown? That gets teased first. And then here I have a piece of a hair donut foundation, which I've cut to match the width of my panel, and I'm just going to pin it on top of the first matted section before moving through the rest of the middle. The foundation will act as a cushion for pins, but it'll also help to reinforce the voluminous shape I'm trying to mimic, and trust me, my thin hair needs all the help that it can get. Now I do have a video on backcombing, which I'll leave in the underbar should you like to check it out, but if it isn't a technique you're comfortable with, maybe a series of cut-up hair foundations could take its place. If you try that, I'd love to know how it turned out. Moving on though, it's finally time for the handmade headband, and I think you can see that I'm putting it on relatively close to my forehead. I'm also inserting the sides of it between the hair near my temples. It ends up that there's a section of hair in front and behind the headband in these places. I'm also going to pull up the ends of my teased hair from the center panel, which kind of messed with the shape I just built, but couldn't have been helped. Sometimes extra steps are impossible to get around when you're working on your own head. I needed room under the middle section so that I could comb back the sides and tie them together there. And to do this, I combed out the hair behind the side of the headband and then the hair in front of it. I used a style clip to hold my first completed side, did the other one, and then used a clear elastic to tie them together in the back. Once I released the ends of the teased portion, they fell over this ponytail, concealing it, but I did have to go back and smooth out the crinkles again, which took me a moment or two. I then gathered it together and carefully tied an elastic right at the nape. The ponytail gets wrapped around 2 fingers into an oblong sort of roll, which then gets pinned down into place. I found that heavier 2-inch pins were great for this. All that's left are the braids. Now I did find one gif of Carrie Fisher turning her head to the side, and it sort of looked as though the braids were arranged in some sort of figure 8 shape. This might not be the case, but for now I'm going to try and follow that sort of pattern. I started with the 2 on the outsides by draping them up and over the middle of the roll and pinning the ends to their corresponding opposite sides. I did the same with the inner 2 as well, and I did use a few open pins in the center just to straighten out the X-style shape that the crisscrossing made. The ends were then wrapped under and around, and with that, I was finished. I hope you all enjoyed my inspired little hair idea today. Leia is an incredible character, one that's influenced and inspired women all over the world. If you're a fan, you should check out the trailer for the documentary, Looking for Leia, which I'll have linked below. One of the women interviewed is a colleague of mine, and I'm super pumped to hear what she and all the other ladies have to say. Again, I hope you had fun watching, and until next time, have fun and keep braiding. Bye!